So I'm going to jump straight into the questions. I know Maureen has a flight to catch, so we'll keep it very, very efficient. The first question, really stemming from the discussion, or rather what I presented earlier, was today the environment is really changing, right? And Maureen, I would love to get your perspective that today when you see that there are a lot of these emerging skills, and clearly there is a skill shortage that exists in the market. How are you seeing this upskilling to be a challenge that you're looking at addressing for new skill sets? And are you actually seeing this to vary across different geographies?
So we've spent a lot of time building out role-based learning and certification, certainly during the last couple of years as technology has moved so rapidly. We are seeing a huge interest in new technologies now, and one of the biggest challenges that you mentioned was that there is this tremendous skills gap, and I talk to customers and partners all the time, and they don't know. They say to me, like, where am I going to find this skill set? And the conversation that I'm having with them is, it's going to be challenging, it's going to be competitive, so you really need to have a skilling plan for your organization. And we help them work through what that looks like. What are the skills you have in place today? What are the emerging skills you're going to be using? How are you thinking, and mapping that back also to productivity and innovation, right? Because we know that if you invest in people, they become more productive, they become more innovative, and therefore they deliver better products on behalf of their customers.
Understood. And from Tejveer, I'd love to get your perspective from an organization level perspective. Naturally, the talent that you have within the company, what are the challenges that you're seeing in today's environment in terms of ensuring that they're almost up to speed in terms of how the industry in general is evolving? Purely from your own experience, and you've obviously worked across a width of different organizations, but what are some of the key challenges that you're seeing, from an upskilling perspective, and also, if you are upskilling them, what are the other challenges that you're seeing right now?
Well, that's a tricky one actually, because see, I see it from two perspectives. First and foremost, yes, technology is changing, and every organization like ours as well is hoping that yes, we are able to leverage those technologies to address two key areas. One, either increase revenue, or second, reduce cost. Okay, that's the key motivating factor or key priorities for any CXOs globally today. Now, if I were to look at the resources, the biggest challenge that I foresee is that yes, how quickly the resources can update themselves on the latest technologies. Okay, while there is it's a process, whereby they can do that, and we have partners like AWS who support us in doing so. But then the flip side is that the business demands agility. They are looking for need for speed. They come to us with a problem, and they expect a solution one day prior to that. It is at those times where we see that, yes, how is it that we can look at upskilling or leveraging the existing skill set that we have, and then still be able to deliver to the business. And that is where we look outside the ecosystem, outside the internal organization, and look for value adds from various partners. And to be very honest with you, over the last so many years, we have been able to successfully manage that by looking at managed services partners who come in, who deliver the, at the need of the hour. They come, deliver the solutions that we need. We deliver it to the business, and business as usual then.
One of the key points which you mentioned earlier also was that when it comes to AI capabilities, a lot of organizations are looking outside rather than inside. I'd love to actually get both perspectives over here. Maureen, firstly, starting with you, why do you actually feel that companies are, or do you think companies should do more in terms of focusing on the talent that they have inside, seeing ways in which they can upskill them, specifically within this space? Or is this a state of evolution where something new that comes in, you first search externally and then go?
I think it really depends on the company's strategy, to your point, right? It's like, it depends on how you're organized. It depends on what your priorities and your goals and your outcomes are for your organization. I do think you need to, if you have an approach where you have some insourced and some outsourced, you still need to make sure that the talent that you have, that they're kind of ramped in the same way, that they have the same skill sets, that they're speaking the same languages, because otherwise you're going to lose time. So we, the good news is, at least at AWS, we train our customers and we train our partners the same exact way. We have the same exact programs for them, and so that helps. But I do think that companies today are missing an opportunity to create kind of a culture of ongoing learning. Technology is moving so rapidly, you almost don't have time, right? So at least at AWS, we've launched a digital platform. A lot of the training in there is available for free and designed to be consumed as people need it, right? And so we're constantly updating that platform every day, literally, right, with new content and making sure it's available as close to a product release or ahead of a product release as we can. And I think the mind shift for customers and partners needs to be slightly different. It's like, how do you provide 24/7 accessibility to training when someone has time? Because even me, right, I set aside a little bit of time every single week to just ramp up on something, anything that I need to know for my job or for the industry. And I think we're working with companies to help them think through that. And when you invest in your employees, the retention literally statistically, it's just better.
Well, to Maureen's point, in my opinion, organizations like ours, large enterprises, I think the focus is that, yes, can we look at the core being internal to us? That's where the focus is, because we understand the business like no one else. Partners, ecosystems, they will come and go. It's very difficult for them to really understand as to what our business expertise is, or what we actually expect, from the overall solution per se. So if the core is with us, then we can leverage the ecosystem that they are trying to build up, with the partners, and they can come and deliver with the skill sets, that they have. So that is how one can go ahead and deliver the expectations from the business or from the management.
So from an organizational perspective, Tejveer, just continuing on that, like, how would the organization react to a sudden requirement which comes in a couple of months? Like, hey, we need this type of talent to solve X particular need. How do you actually implement that practically?
I think that's called IT, right? We are all living that life right from ages. So I think it's more of collaboration. Okay, if you look at decades ago, IT was just a service provider or, a back-end support team. Today, we have a seat at the table, right, wherein we understand the business. In fact, we are the ones who are actually enabling the business guys. So they understand technology far better than what we also, what we can showcase to them. So I think it's quite collaborative, it's quite cohesive. And that's where the expectations are being met. We understand as to what business would expect out of us in the times to come. So it's proactive thinking. Once you start collaborating, everything seems, it becomes so seamless per se. So that is how we are able to address all those needs.
Understood. Maureen, from your perspective, you work with the world's biggest organizations, and at the same time, also a lot of SMBs across different organizations. What are some of the changes that you're seeing in terms of the mindset when you're working with these partners? Like, what are some of the biggest changes you've seen in the last, I would say, couple of years with the emergence of these technologies? Have the requirements, therefore, coming in from some of your partners changed significantly?
Yeah, I mean, 10 years ago, I worked for a company, and we released software every 2 years, right? And then we train every one of our customers and every one of our partners. And so over the last 12 years since I've been at AWS, I've seen a significant change. The conversations are really around, what are the technologies and what are your goals, and like trying to be thinking, about the future more, kind of working backwards from what does good look like. And I would say it's a mind shift, because I don't think people invested in training didn't have to, not as much, right? And now they just don't even have that option. So I see some companies doing it very, very well, where they will invest in cloud fluency and train everybody in the company. We see this a lot in financial services industry, where there's huge investments in training, marketing, finance, business leaders, and I think companies that have that strategy are doing really, really well, right? They're innovating faster. And then we see, we've seen a lot of companies moving more towards that. But it's still, it's a lot. It's a total mind shift in the way that you think about talent development.
Interesting. And Tej, we'd just love to get your perspective from an organizational lens, right? Like, how have you, even internally within organizations, what are some of the biggest changes that you've seen or would like to see to ensure that, companies are just a bit more, organizations are a bit more, I would say, just faster in terms of their reaction to the changes that are happening in the market? Like, what would you look at? Would you look at something from an organizational perspective?
Well, in my mind, I think it's a cultural change, as Maureen also said. Over the last 4-5 years, we are seeing that shift from a management perspective. They also understand that, yes, such technologies can bring a huge upside to the revenue. So fundamentally, if you see, people are looking at creating a framework by virtue of which the business, the management, and the CHRO are coming together to create that framework which provides that so-called training initiatives. It's being inculcated as part of the KRA or the KPIs of the individuals so that they can learn, they can upskill, and it addresses two things. One, how quickly they can bring the business up to speed, number one, and number two, it provides an opportunity for individuals for their personal and professional growth. I think that is what is being addressed by such frameworks, per se.
I think the interesting thing you said about, and I see this all the time, like I read the board reports and they are information from companies, but I'm hearing across the industry that it's the board's top priority to skill, but there's like a disconnect between what they're saying and how they're operating within their organizations. And I think, if you do one thing as a company, you have to have someone held accountable for skilling. And most time, it could be a CHRO, but in my opinion, it should be someone in the business that understands it.
So Maureen, just to add to that, actually it's got twofold. One, the CEO or the promoter, that has to, that person has to drive that, and of course, as you rightly said, the business. But then the flip side is that what happens if people leave the organization once they get upskilled?
They're going to. I mean, that's the reality, right? I mean, you are going to skill people and invest in people, and they will leave. I'm not saying consistently, but we see it. But what we have seen is that if you have a really strong culture of learning in organizations, the data shows that the retention is better. So it's more than training, right? It's creating communities within organizations, having thought leaderships, leaving time for learning. It's not enough to just train and certify someone, because to your point, they may just, and especially in areas, emerging technology areas, like that's a risk. But what I would ask you is, what's the risk if you don't train them?
So I guess it's culture change, but
I guess it'll also be interesting, if we are talking about attrition, I think the question is that what can also be done within the organization, knowing that upskilling is almost not an option. I mean, it's almost, you have to do it. So I guess one is that seen more at a entry level versus, at a mid management level? Is that a challenge which you're seeing more at that level? And is there anything that you're actually doing about it at an organizational level?
I think a couple of things. You are very right. Most of such challenges are at the entry level, grassroots level, because the netizens or the young generation, what they are looking at is how quickly they can make a quick buck. But end of the day, what we are trying to do is we are trying to create a culture and environment where we see loyalty. How is it that we can inculcate our organization's core values in those employees? We have many examples where we see people retiring from our organization, and that has been their first and the last job. Yeah. So we are trying to get them on board and see as to how they can drive that behavioral change. So it is not just about technology, but it's also the softer skills. We are trying to build upon that. And what will happen is that, yes, we'll be able to retain that talent, provide that entire growth path for them.
I think you bring a good point, because we see that kind of across industry. It's the people, it's the early career talent, to your point. It's just different these days, right? People don't have that same, you work for a company for 10 or 12 years. So I think that's when your culture of your company and if you can do it in any way, any kind of career pathing, visuals for them to say this is what it could be for you as a career. But that takes time and effort, right? So you have to think about what are the things that are going to make it fun, what's important to your culture of your company. Amazon has a very strong culture, and so we apply it in one way, but I think you have to do that. Employee experience is just as important as training, in my opinion.
I think just moving in a completely different direction, I was reading somewhere about how, organizations and AI in particular are also driving cultural change, and specifically in terms of equal representation. I know, Maureen, you sort of lead a lot of initiatives at AWS to drive diversity. Curious to know from both of you, how can, you leverage technology and also leverage, what are some of the main changes that organizations can sort of undertake within their cultural DNA to ensure that, A, they're upskilling the right talent? Is perhaps some of your data at your end showing that there is a change in pattern that is happening? And also, I guess, maybe follow that up, Tejveer, your perspective from an organizational level, how are you seeing that sort of changing?
Yeah, I think with diversity, you have to be super intentional about it. And we are, my entire team is about, our vision is to build diverse workers for the world, right? That's our mantra. And everything that we build and design, we design for diversity, accessibility, and make it as much as we can free, as much as we go into communities where we have structured programs to educate individuals, and then we partner them with companies to try and see if they will, interview and get jobs. And so that's what we do. And I think, this year we'll train more than 10 million people around the globe. And, I think we're scratching the surface of what we can do. But if you don't do it with some sense of intentionality in how you build programs and make them accessible, I don't think we'll ever get there.
I think, generally speaking, I can't speak for my organization, but generally speaking, it's very important to really understand the use case scenarios and the workloads for these technologies that you may have, which you can imbibe into your own organization, and accordingly create a strategy and a plan to either upskill or address those training requirements. I think it could be different for each and every organization per se. So there's no straight answer to your question, but that's what I would do.
Sure.
Go back to the basics, drawing board, and create a plan.
I think,
Go
I was
ahead.
just going to say, I was just sitting on a panel this morning with a lot of the large GSI partners and women leading initiatives within their organization. And I think there's a lot of good companies that are doing interesting things and looking at the technology and how do they reskill, and not only reskill, but how do they make sure that women are put on projects where they're going to build and drive their skill set. Because we know that if you have, regardless of the technology, you have diverse perspectives, you're just going to build a better product for your customer.
No, I love that. I think driving and ensuring there's intentionality across the board, I think it's like a key message. And I think that's something which all of us would strongly encourage everybody in this room. I really appreciate the time, both of you. Thank you so much. And I would request everyone to give them a round of applause, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.